Would you like to know a secret about why smart people get stuck? Come here. They think their ideas are good, and they probably are, but being right is not the same as making progress. And being smart, that might be your biggest obstacle. Stay with me, because at the end of this video, I'm going to give you the exact mental shift that separates stuck thinkers from smart creators who actually move their dream forward. And to prove it to you, we're going to talk about rejection, ego, and one of the most brilliant writers who has ever lived, who got rejected over 600 times. Now, before we go any further, I'm Derek Selinger, performed all over the world for royalty, celebrities, Fortune 500 companies. I'm a master illusionist, but more than that, I'm obsessed with what makes dreams real. Why some people stay stuck in their head, while others break through and live the lives that seem impossible to most. And that's what this channel is about. So if that's the journey you're on, stick with me. Now let's start here. The lie, it's if I'm smart, I'll succeed. It sounds logical. You were probably praised for being smart growing up. You figured things out maybe a little faster than your peers. Maybe you still do. But the problem is, being smart isn't a strategy, it's a trait. This is also applicable if you feel like you weren't smart. You are always trying to keep up. So pay attention if you're in that boat too, because traits don't build dreams, systems do, actions do, iteration does. Let me tell you a story. When I first started performing magic, I became a student of the art form. I read every book I could find. I watched every piece of content I could find. And this was a long time ago, before we had the interweb in order to help us succeed. So it took a lot of research and a lot of effort to find this information. And I considered myself to be a pretty smart guy. I did well in school. I did well in my postgraduate studies. And I figured I could figure this out just through study. And I studied and I studied, and I did improve. I did get things to move forward a little bit, but I kept running into the same walls. I couldn't figure out how to crack the performance in the way I wanted it to go, and so I could move this forward as a career. Just trying to figure it out on my own wasn't working. It didn't start to click until I laid down my ego and I started to look for help, specifically in the world of community and mentors. I went to a masterclass that was hosted by my mentor, Jeff McBride, and I started way back in the late 90s studying with Jeff McBride. And under his guidance, my career began to take off because I was willing to humble myself and realize I may be smart enough to figure out a lot of things, but I can't figure out everything, and I need help. That's when everything began to change. And then there's this. Some of the most talented people I know are stuck at square one. Why? Because they don't want to look stupid. They built their whole identity around being the smartest person in the room. But dream chasing, it's messy, public, often awkward. You will look stupid. You will get rejected. And if you're not willing to, you stay stuck. The shift is smart doesn't equal valuable. And that's a hard one for a lot of people. I once heard someone say, you can be brilliant in your own bedroom and broke in real life. And that's true. You know who figured that out the hard way? Jack London, the famous author of The Call of the Wild. He was rejected over 600 times before ever being published for a single thing. 600. He was living in a slum, scraping by as a janitor, while editors threw his stories in the trash. And let's be honest, he was probably smarter than most of those editors. But it didn't matter, because brilliance alone doesn't open doors. Persistence does. Craft does. Knowing when to adapt and when to stay the course does. Eventually, Jack cracked the code. He adjusted his stories, leaned into clarity and the commercial structure. And when he did, he didn't just get published, he became one of the most celebrated writers of his time. Not because he was smart, but because he was willing to get better. And here's the secret. Start before you're ready, and then stay long enough to get good. Most smart people over-prepare and under-commit. They spend 3 years reading books and then 3 minutes taking action, and then wonder why nothing ever happens. Dreams move at the speed of decision, and progress, it happens when you combine motion with feedback. Now, what does that look like? Let me tell you a story. I still remember learning to ride a bike. Wobbly handlebars, knees already scraped from the last attempt, and this weird mix of excitement and terror. No one sat me down with a manual. No one gave me a TEDx talk on bicycle physics. They just said, go on, try again. And that would be my dad, actually. And I did, over and over. I crashed into a hedge. I fell sideways on the driveway. At one point, I was convinced my bike was secretly working against me, like it was possessed by some evil spirit wanting me to crash. But then something clicked. Not because I got smarter, but because I kept showing up. You don't think your way onto riding a bike. You ride your way onto knowing how. And that's how dreams work too. You try, you fail, you try again, and eventually something clicks. But if you stand on the curb waiting until you're sure, you won't crash, but you also never ride. And worse, you'll start telling yourself that the lie that maybe bikes just aren't for you. You don't learn how to do your dream. You become someone who does it. The bike wobbles, you skin your knee, you try again. And after a while, you're not thinking about balance, you're thinking about riding. That's how momentum works. It feels impossible right until the moment it doesn't. So, if you're smart and stuck, remember this. You don't need more intelligence. You probably don't need more information. You need more motion. Start before you're ready. Stay long enough to get good. Be like Jack London. Get rejected 600 times if that's what it takes. Because your dream isn't waiting for the smartest version of you. It's waiting for the boldest one. Now, if this hit you where it hurts or where it helps, subscribe. We're building something here, a movement of people who don't just dream, they act. And I want you with us.